We all think about it, don't we? Keeping our minds sharp, vibrant, just like we try to keep the rest of ourselves, especially as the years go by.
Absolutely. It's a huge concern for so many people. And that's really why this study caught our eye. It was reported on by Mind Body Green based on research in a top journal, Alzheimer's and Dementia.
Right.
And it asks this really compelling question. Could something straightforward, like getting more vitamin D, actually make a difference in, lowering dementia risk?
Exactly. That's the heart of what we're digging into today. We really want to unpack this research. Does the evidence stack up? Could boosting vitamin D be a powerful step for protecting our cognitive health? We'll look at how the study was set up, the key findings, dementia rates, survival, and importantly, did it work the same for everyone?
Yeah, those details matter.
Okay, let's get right into it. How exactly did they conduct this study? What was the approach?
Well, this was what we call an observational study. So they weren't giving people vitamin D, but rather looking at existing data to see if there were links, correlations.
Oh.
They used a huge database from the National Alzheimer's Coordinating Center, the NACC, and the scale here is pretty impressive. 12,388 older adults. Average age was around 71.
Wow, okay, 12,000 people, that's substantial. And cognitively speaking, where were they all at when things kicked off?
That's a really key point. Everyone was dementia-free at the start, but they weren't all the same. They fell into two initial categories. People with normal cognitive function and those already showing signs of mild cognitive impairment, or MCI.
Got it. So normal cognition, or MCI, but no actual dementia yet. And the vitamin D part, how do they track that if they weren't giving supplements?
They basically relied on what the participants reported. So they formed two groups. One was the vitamin D exposed group. These were folks who said they're already taking vitamin D supplements like D2, D3, maybe with calcium, before their first study check-in.
Okay, before they even started the study's observations.
Exactly. And the other group was non-exposed people who didn't report taking extra vitamin D supplements during the study period. And it's really crucial to stress, this study looked for an association, a link. It doesn't definitively prove that the vitamin D caused the lower dementia rates,
Understood. Correlation, not necessarily causation. So they followed these two groups. What did they find? What were the big results regarding dementia?
Well, the headline finding is pretty dramatic, actually. The group that had been exposed to vitamin D, they had a 40% lower incidence rate of dementia compared to the non-exposed group.
40%, wow.
Yeah, 40%. That's a really significant number. It strongly suggests a potential protective effect.
That is striking. Were there other sort of related health benefits they noticed?
Yes, actually. They also looked at survival over 5 years, and the vitamin D exposed group had a 15% higher survival rate during that time compared to the others.
Interesting. So potentially broader benefits than just the brain.
It hints at that, yeah. And another thing that seemed important was when people might have started taking it.
Ah, right. What did they find there?
Well, think about this. Over the 10 years of the study, among the people who did develop dementia, a huge majority, 75% of them had no prior history of taking vitamin D supplements.
75%. So it really seems like getting that exposure earlier, maybe before problems start, could be key.
That's definitely what the data seems to suggest, the idea of prevention, perhaps starting earlier rather than later.
Okay, this is fascinating. Now, you mentioned they looked at different subgroups. Did these potential benefits hold up across the board? Or did it vary?
This is where it gets even more interesting, I think. Let's talk about gender. We know women generally have a higher risk of dementia over their lifetime.
Right.
But in this study, women actually showed a stronger response to vitamin D exposure. About 23% better response than men, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So for women who were in that vitamin D exposed group, their dementia rate was 49% lower compared to women who weren't taking supplements, nearly half.
Wow, almost a 50% lower rate for women taking it. That's huge. What about people who already had some cognitive issues, that MCI group you mentioned?
Good question. Even for those participants starting with mild cognitive impairment, being in the vitamin D exposed group still made a difference. They saw a 33% lower incidence of progressing to dementia compared to the MCI folks who weren't taking vitamin D.
Okay, so even if you're already experiencing some slight decline, it might still offer some benefit. That's quite hopeful.
It does offer that hopeful perspective, yes.
Sure.
That intervention might still be valuable.
And genetics. We hear a lot about the APOE4 gene increasing Alzheimer's risk. Did they look at that?
They did, yeah. That APOE4 gene is a known risk factor. And they found that carriers of this gene who were in the vitamin D exposed group still had a 33% lower dementia incidence compared to carriers who were not taking vitamin D.
So even for people with that genetic predisposition, vitamin D exposure was linked to a lower risk. That's pretty significant too.
It is. It suggests that even with a higher genetic risk, this might be one factor that could potentially, mitigate some of that risk.
So if we kind of step back and look at the big picture, it seems like there's a pretty strong signal here, right? Increased vitamin D intake is associated with potentially lower dementia risk, maybe better survival, and this seems to apply across different groups, especially as started before major cognitive decline.
That sums up the promising side of it, yes. But, and this is a big but, we absolutely have to talk about the study's limitations, things it doesn't tell us.
Right, the caveats, always important. What are the main ones we need to keep in mind here?
Okay, first big one. They didn't actually measure vitamin D levels in anyone's blood. They knew who reported taking supplements, but not what their actual serum levels were.
Okay. So we don't know if they reached, say, an optimal level or just took some amount.
Exactly. We don't know if they were sufficient or optimal or still deficient despite taking something. That's a missing piece.
Makes sense. And related to that, I guess.
Dosage. They didn't have specific information on how much vitamin D the exposed group was taking. Was it 1,000 IU? 5,000 IU? You don't know.
Right. So it's hard to say take X amount based on this study alone.
Precisely. Makes drawing conclusions about an effective dose impossible from this data. And the other major point, we touched on it earlier.
The observational nature of it.
Yes, it shows a strong link, a correlation. But it cannot prove definitively that the vitamin D caused the lower dementia risk.
Right. It could be that people who choose to take vitamin D also happen to do other healthy things. Maybe they exercise more, eat better diets, have better access to healthcare.
That's the classic correlation versus causation issue. Those other unmeasured lifestyle factors, known as confounders, could be playing a role.
Okay, that's a really important distinction.
It is. However, it's also fair to say, as MindBody Green points out in the reporting, this study doesn't exist in a vacuum. There is other research out there linking low vitamin D levels to higher dementia risk.
Right.
And some studies looking at brain tissue have found higher vitamin D concentrations are associated with better cognitive outcomes. So this study adds a significant piece to that larger accumulating picture.
Okay, so putting it all together, for you listening right now, what's the practical takeaway? What should people do with this information?
Well, given these findings, even with the caveats and considering the wider research context, it certainly suggests that ensuring you have adequate vitamin D levels, well, it could be a really worthwhile proactive step for your long-term brain health.
So thinking about maintaining sufficient levels, perhaps through supplementation.
That's one potential strategy, yes.
Yeah.
Thinking about maybe high-potency daily vitamin D supplementation to help reach and maintain those adequate levels. Of course, that's a conversation to have with a doctor.
Absolutely. And for those of you interested in exploring supplements, the MindBody Green article that was our source material does mention their recommendations for high-quality vitamin D products. You can probably find links related to that down in the description below if you want to check those out.
Right. Always good to look at reliable sources if you're considering supplements.
And hey, while you're down there, if you're finding this deep dive helpful, maybe hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us out.
Yeah, definitely. And we're always curious what you think, or if you have questions.
Oh, for sure. If you've got questions about this, or maybe another topic you want us to tackle next time, just drop it in the comments below. We do read them.
We do.
Okay, so quick wrap up. This big study strongly suggests a link and association between taking vitamin D and having a lower risk of dementia, plus potential benefits for survival and interesting differences like a stronger effect for women and benefits even for those with MCI or the APOE4 gene.
A good summary.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate those important limitations, observational study, no blood level data, no specific dosages known. Keep those in mind.
Definitely. So as you think about this, maybe it's worth a chat with your doctor, see if checking your levels or considering supplementation makes sense for your individual situation.
Sound advice. And that brings us to maybe a final bit of food for thought for you. We've talked a lot about vitamin D today based on this research. But given these intriguing findings, what other proactive steps could you be thinking about or maybe exploring to really build that long-term cognitive resilience and just support your overall brain health as you age?
Good question to ponder.